Hi, everyone. We'll give people just a few minutes to get into the webinar before we get started. For those of you just joining, we're just going to give people just a little bit of time to get into the webinar, and then we'll get started. And while people are joining, I'll give another reminder in a minute, but if you have any questions, we're going to do our best to answer those at the end. You should see a Q&A function to ask that question. So you can go ahead and put those in there anytime that you have a question. And again, I'll do my best at the end to answer those for you. And again, just a minute or two here to let people get in to the webinar. Well, I think we'll get started. My name is Neil Liebenguth. I am one of the assistant directors of financial aid here at the University of St. Thomas. I'm going to be talking about understanding your financial aid award today. I mentioned earlier, but if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those at the end. There is a Q&A function that you can use in the webinar to ask those questions, and I'll do my best to answer whatever you ask at the end of the webinar tonight. If you want to come back and watch this later, we are going to be recording it as well. Before we start any presentation at St. Thomas, we do like to start with our land acknowledgement. The University of St. Thomas occupies the ancestral and current homelands of the Dakota people, Miniso Makoche. We also recognize the Ojibwe and Ho-Chunk, whose lands were colonized by the United States and are currently occupied by the state of Minnesota. We condemn the tools of settler colonialism, including genocide and forced assimilation, undertaken in the name of white supremacy that created structures of injustice and inequity that continue to oppress and marginalize Indigenous and underrepresented peoples. We work to continue the process of decolonizing minds and educating students to be morally responsible leaders. We commit to the work of truth-telling and relationship building as we seek new pathways forward as relatives in the University of St. Thomas community, the Indigenous communities, and those who traverse multiple communities. So today, what we're going to go over is I'm going to give you a brief recap of financial aid in general, kind of just give a reminder of what financial aid is before we kind of dig into things. And then I'm going to talk about actually reading the award letter. We're going to talk about accessing our Murphy Online system, and I'll explain what that is in a bit too. And then we'll end with talking about what some of the next steps are going to be once you have your financial aid award letter. I know a big part of our audience are parents of students, but I do know we have students as well. I'll probably just by habit switch back and forth between saying your students or you, the student. But I tried to make this information good for everybody, good general knowledge for everybody, regardless if you're a parent or the student themselves. So why don't we start with just what financial aid is as a recap. Financial aid at its core is just money that you, the student, receive to help pay for your college costs. Financial aid does break into different categories from that though. The two main camps would be gift aid and self-help. The difference between these two is gift aid is going to be money that's given to the student. It's not going to be required to be repaid later. It's not going to be required to work a job for it. So gift aid is just that. It's a gift. It's money given to the student to help pay for their education. And then self-help is going to be money that is going to have some additional repayments or going to be earned by working a job. So for gift aid, money given to the student, the two main types of those would be scholarships and grants. Scholarships tend to be merit-based or academic-based, something in the student's background. And then grants tend to be need-based. So when we are going to go over the financial aid award here in just a minute, again, scholarships are going to be something that's going to be merit-based, and then grants are going to be need-based, so going to be based on the FAFSA form. Self-help, on the other hand, the two main types of those would be work study, which is going to be, which is another term for campus employment, so working a job on campus, and self-help are also loans. So even though loans need to be repaid in the future, they're still considered financial aid because it does help lower that out-of-pocket costs, the costs owed right now, to help with the costs owed right now to pay for college. So the notification award itself, some of you might have received this in the mail. Some of you might be receiving it probably in the next day or two here. So the notification of award and financial aid plan is what we send to you once we have your FAFSA on file and processed. So it's an overview of your financial aid. There is a lot of information, a lot of important information contained in it. Specifically, the way it's designed, there's a little bit of a fold where you can open up to read even more information, different definitions of things, different information about payment plans, etc. Some things that we're not going to cover today. So there's a lot of information that I encourage you to read on your own time, because it's a good overview of the financial aid process at St. Thomas. It is the only print copy that you're going to receive for the financial aid award. So if there are any changes in the future, we're going to deliver that information electronically. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. But this is going to be the what comes in the mail for you as an overview of what your costs to attend St. Thomas are. So within the notification of award, there's a page called the financial plan, and this is kind of the heart of what you're looking for. This is what tells you what your costs to attend St. Thomas are going to be. So I'm going to go over this step by step to hopefully explain the different details within it, and to hopefully that you'll walk away with a better understanding of what costs are going to be for you or your student. One thing to note up front is that this is essentially random information as far as the financial aid award portion of it. So it's not a typical award necessarily. It's not the average award. I basically picked a financial aid award at random to use as an example. So, so your remaining costs might be higher or lower than this. Again, it's a more or less completely random selection of a financial aid award. So number one for the financial aid award are costs. So costs are going to be what is charged to the students. So first and foremost is tuition. Tuition essentially pays for the classes at St. Thomas. Tuition is the same charge for any amount of credits the student registers for, between 12 to 18 credits each semester. So there's no per credit charge depending on the number of classes the student's taking. It's essentially a flat rate of tuition. There are other terms outside of our typical fall and spring. There's January and summer terms that are an additional cost that aren't included here. But this is the cost for the fall and spring semesters combined for the school year. Same with required fees. Required fees are basically everything outside of the classroom. So it's activity, athletics, health services, facilities, technology. So again, everything outside of the classroom. So tuition and required fees are going to be the same for all incoming students. There's no variation based off of specifically how many classes they're taking or what they're doing on campus or anything like that. And then again, these are the costs for the full school year. So we charge one semester at a time, but when we're letting you know your financial aid, we're going to be giving you the information for one school year at a time. And then room and board is the next line there. Room and board, another term for housing and meal plan costs. So the way that the meal plan works is that all incoming freshman students are on the unlimited meal plan. So there's no variation in charge there. The one that you'll see a variation on is the room charge. We use a weighted average when we're putting this number together of all of the different first year residence hall options. But depending on student selection and then ultimately where the student is placed, you'll see a little bit of variation, either higher or lower from what the room charge is. So for example, Tommy North or Tommy East are a little bit more expensive than the average for the school year, and because they're the brand new residence halls on campus, where for example, Brady Hall or Dowling Hall which are newly renovated, but a little bit older buildings, those are a little less than the average. So it's one thing to know when you get that final bill, you might see some variation there. That's just because of the nature of how that selection works. But estimated direct costs, that's going to be everything that shows up on the bill from St. Thomas. So everything we just talked about. These are estimated until May when our Board of Trustees officially sets these costs. Now, generally, there's not much variation between what we estimate early on in January here and what gets finalized in May, but there is potential. So just want to let you know, it's likely not going to be thousands of dollars difference. It's likely not even going to be hundreds of dollars of difference, but there's could be a little bit of difference just depending on how close we were on our estimation, we being the financial aid office. But there are some costs that you want to plan for that we're not including here. So those would be books and supplies. We have students budget up to about $1,000 for the school year for books and supplies. Travel expenses, so getting to and from campus on breaks. If a student signs up for a science class with a lab portion, there might be a lab fee there that gets added on. Other courses might have other course fees. Other personal expenses, so everything from pizza to shampoo, whatever, things that aren't going to get charged directly by the school. So just other things that might come up as far as costs that real costs that you have, but not something that's necessarily going to show up on the bill other than those lab fees, which those are going to be class by class. So that's the first section. So just knowing the cost before financial aid. So the next section is going to be the financial aid award portion. So we do have, so we have combined or condensed down some information here. So I'll talk about Murphy Online in a second, but that's where you can see the individual line items of a financial aid award. But what we have here for example, for the first line, St. Thomas scholarships, these would be any scholarships that the student or your student has been awarded up to this point. And then the St. Thomas grants, these would be any need-based grants directly from St. Thomas, so St. Thomas dollars that the student has been awarded at this point. And then federal and state grants would be, it's blank for this student, but federal and state grants would be any additional grant funds that were awarded based off of the FAFSA form from either the state or the federal government. We combine these here, but if a student's awarded both types of grants, they'll see those broken down on our Murphy Online system. But just to make it a little easier to read, we try to combine some information. So you can see the total gift aid, like we mentioned earlier, gift aid is going to be the money given to the student. So no, these aren't going to be funds that need to be repaid later or work a job for. So underneath that is the loan section. So you can see federal direct loan subsidized and unsubsidized there. So the difference between these two is that subsidized has no interest that accrues while the student's in school, and then unsubsidized does accrue interest while the student's in school. The breakdown between these two is determined by the FAFSA results for the student. So for first year freshman students, it's always going to be $5,500 total, but the breakdown is going to be determined by the FAFSA. So we do that calculation in the financial aid office. So if you see a blank there for subsidized loan and $5,500 for an unsubsidized loan, that means that you specifically qualify for all of those loan funds to be unsubsidized. So either way, again, no payments are actually due while the student's in school. I'll go into this a little bit more a little later in the presentation, but just know that, again, federal loans do need to be repaid after college, but we are going to factor these into the final costs here in a second. So you can see broken out what the total gift aid is, what the total student loans are, and then all together what the financial aid award is. Key thing to know with any grants that the student might be awarded, these do need to be able to be renewed. Students do need to file the FAFSA again each year to receive either St. Thomas grants or federal and state grants. And then federal direct loans also require the FAFSA to be filed each year. So it's not a one and done thing. It is something that needs to be filed each year, and then we reevaluate each year. Typically for St. Thomas grants, students that receive it in their first year will likely receive it all 4 years as well. The only thing that can change that would be if there's a major change to the family's finances. And then St. Thomas scholarships, students need to maintain at least a 2.0 grade point average and maintain satisfactory academic progress and register for at least 12 credits every semester to be able to receive their St. Thomas scholarship each semester, up to 8 total semesters, so 4 years. So that's the financial aid award section. And then number 3, we calculate all of that up. So you can see from the top, the total estimated direct costs, so everything before financial aid, what the student has been awarded in financial aid. So that does include both the gift aid and loan section. And then total out-of-pocket amount here is going to be probably the most important line on this breakdown, because this is what the remaining amount after financial aid is going to be for the school year. You can see student employment broken up below that. That amount can vary based off of FAFSA results too. Typical, so this is one student's award. Oftentimes you'll see $4,000 here. That's the typical amount, but it can vary based off of the student's specific results and other aid awarded. We don't factor that into that remaining cost. So any amount that you see below total out-of-pocket, those are funds that a student can choose to work on campus and apply towards that cost to help reduce it further. So it's not factored into it. So that's why it's below that total out-of-pocket cost amount. And again, this is an estimate. Final cost will be finalized in May. And it also, again, depends on any additional course charges that a student might have. And then also if there's any changes to the financial aid award because update to the FAFSA happened or something like that, it can that can change that as well. But based off the information that we have right now, this is the estimate for the total amount. For most families, this is going to be the best number that you're going to have as far as planning for what the costs to attend St. Thomas are going to be for the coming school year. And we'll talk about some additional options to help cover these remaining costs a little later in the presentation. So that's kind of the breakdown of the financial plan. So again, it's a handy one sheet to be able to refer to while you're comparing St. Thomas's costs to other schools that you might be considering. So you're able to look at these side by side to see, this is my real cost to attend St. Thomas. Now let's look at school X and school Y to see what their real costs are to attend. So next thing we're going to go over is how to access our Murphy Online system. So what is Murphy Online? It's a secure online environment for student information at St. Thomas. So on the incoming process, the main thing that students are going to use it for is the financial aid process. But later on, if a student does enroll at St. Thomas, this is where registration happens. This is where they can update their personal information. So right now, students are probably familiar with their admission applicant portal. Once students really start at St. Thomas, they'll move over to using Murphy Online for most of their registration or other needs. So this is where the full financial aid award details are located. So again, we condensed everything down. So there's nothing missing from that financial plan sheet. But if you want to see kind of more line by line, this is where you can see the full financial aid details. You can see the different terms and conditions for financial aid. For example, the Minnesota State grant requires 15 or more credits each semester to be able to receive the full amount. So you can see some of those different terms and conditions there. You can see any outstanding requirements that might still need to be fulfilled for our office. So if there's any conflicts on your FAFSA or anything like that, that's where we'll let you know about that in Murphy Online. We'll also send out an email coming up here soon to alert you of that. You can report outside scholarships in Murphy Online. And then most importantly, you can view any updates to your award. So if there are any updates that happen, we will send both student and parents an email indicating that there's been an update to the award, and you should view that on Murphy Online. For most students, they don't receive any sort of update. That what you've already received is probably going to be set going into your freshman year. But if there is an update, we want to make sure we alert you to that right away. And Murphy Online is where you're going to see that. So it's a good idea to set up your access to it now. So when you get that email, you can quickly take a look and see what changes there might be. So you'll go to stthomas.edu/awarded to get started. Also, if most of you should have received an email as well indicating that your financial aid award was on the way to you in the mail. This information is also located in that email too. So just a kind of a quick overview of how you get access to Murphy Online. So you'll go to stthomas.edu/new, which will prompt you to activate your account. You'll need the 9-digit St. Thomas ID number that is in that email that I just mentioned. You can also find that in the admission applicant portal as well. If you have any trouble with this, feel free to reach out to either financial aid counselor or admission counselor, and we can help you get that number pretty quickly. But you'll need that to move forward. And then you'll just follow the on-screen prompts to activate your account. One thing I like to clarify too, activating your account with St. Thomas is not you confirming your enrollment. It doesn't obligate you to enroll at St. Thomas or accept any of the aid. It just allows you secure access to this information. So no additional commitment with securing your activating your account. The other thing you have to do, and many of you are probably getting used to this process for other websites, you do have to set up what's called multi-factor authentication, which is kind of a fancy way of saying using your phone to confirm you are who you say you are. Setting up multi-factor authentication just essentially makes the information on Murphy Online even more secure, so we know it's the right person logging in. Another reminder, because I know I have a lot of parents in the audience, any information that you're going to be supplying for this process is specifically the student's information. So it's one thing, don't accidentally put your own information in. I suggest doing this with your student at the very least to kind of walk through this process, because it is going to be their information and information they're going to need if they do decide to attend St. Thomas. So it's a good process to do together as a family at the very least. Make sure as you're working on this that you're putting in using the student's information and not your own by accident. That does happen. And then we have to kind of work with our IT office to kind of get everything fixed if that does happen, if the parent accidentally uses their information. So, but if you want and need step-by-step instructions, you can also find that at that stthomas.edu/awarded page. If you have any trouble with this process, reach out to financial aid counselor. We might set you up with our ITS office depending on what the questions are. But most families can kind of get through it pretty quickly and get into our Murphy Online system. So once you do have that all set up and you log into Murphy Online, you'll navigate to the financial aid page. There'll be one of the 4 or 5 tabs that you'll have an option to click on. And this is what the home page of the financial aid Murphy Online page looks like. So you can see I mentioned student requirements. Most students won't have anything listed here, but if you do have any outstanding requirements, you'll see them either in yellow or red here. Most of you will just see that we have your FAFSA on file with a green check mark, which is good. So once you get to this homepage, you can click around as much as you want. But the main thing that you're going to want to click on is award offer here, because that'll take you to the full financial aid award. And once you click on that, you will see a message letting you know that's your financial aid award offer. And the first section you'll see are grants and scholarships to pay for college. A couple of notes here. You'll see that any grants or scholarships that are offered are going to be listed as accepted already. We just go ahead and pre-accept those for all students, whether you've committed to St. Thomas or not, just because we know if you're going to come to St. Thomas, you're probably going to take the free money and not turn it down. At least I haven't run into anyone yet who has decided to turn down their scholarships or grants. So we are not going to make you go ahead and accept that separately. We just are going to assume that if you confirm your enrollment at St. Thomas, you're going to want those funds. The other thing to point out too is if you'll see a negative sign listed there for the total. Negative is a positive in this case. That just means that when it applies to your account, it's going to be a credit, so it's going to pay down those tuition and fees. So again, don't worry about negative. That's still, like I said, it's still a positive in this situation. But this will also contain any state and federal grants listed too. Any other scholarships a student might have awarded, it'll break it down line by line and also split it between fall and spring semesters. And then once you scroll down from there, you'll see the next part are going to be the work and loan sections. So these are the only sections that students do have to take action on if they're going to choose to use these funds. So another thing to note too, if you accept the loans and work study now and decide later not to come to St. Thomas, it's not a problem. You don't accidentally borrow the loans at St. Thomas if you're not enrolled here. There's different safeguards put into play there. So there's no negative to accepting this aid now. But also on the flip side, if you're not ready to make that decision, we're not going to make you make that decision right now. I normally suggest that students that are going to enroll at St. Thomas make their decision on their federal loans and work study probably by beginning of August. So we have enough time to process different paperwork that you'll have to do with those things. So lots of times we'll send you lots of reminders to take a look at this. But again, no need to take action right now, but I'm just going to show you kind of how that works if you do decide to take action. So the first one for work study, you'll see a box here, and your options are going to be accept, decline, or modify. So with work study, if you do accept those funds, it's not an obligation to work. All that happens if you decide to accept that and not work later would be you just don't receive those funds. And it's also an estimate. Work study is an estimate of what you may receive if you're working on average 10 to 12 hours a week. I'll talk a little bit more about work study in a bit here, but essentially you can earn up to this amount. Work study is also our only fund where we generally can increase it just by request for students. Typically by the end of the school year, we have extra work study funds available for students who are working quite a bit and want to earn more. We generally have funds available from students who decided not to work or work off campus. Unfortunately, it doesn't work the same with scholarship money or grant money. We can't just award you extra of that because students decided not to take that, or extra loans. More rules are in place for those, but work study is one that, again, if students really motivated to work quite a bit on campus, we can normally offer them a bit more than that initial award. So same process for loans. If this student here that I use as an example only has the unsubsidized loan offered, if the student had the subsidized loan offered as well, you would see 2 drop-down boxes. So students have to take action on both of those separately. Same options, accept, decline, modify. Modify there is if you want to borrow a lower amount, you can choose whatever amount you want listed, or any amount you want up to the listed offered amount there. So again, you'll take action there. Again, no need to decide this right now. Just wanted to let you know how you do it when you do make that decision. And then once you do select those drop-down ones, the last thing is going to be clicking that submit button. And then finally, how to report an outside scholarship. So if you scroll down a little bit further from the loan section, you'll see other resources listed here. So you'll click on the add review resource, and then that will pop up a box that says outside resources. So I have awarded myself Best Financial Aid Counselor money for summer of 2021 of $10,000. But if you have a real scholarship to award or that you've been awarded from, say, your high school community organization, that's where you can notify us of it. So then we will be expecting like a check to come for you. So we do ask any outside scholarships that a student's been awarded that you do notify us. In most cases, it doesn't affect any financial aid that's been awarded, but sometimes it can affect the work study funds or that subsidized, unsubsidized loan breakdown. We don't reduce scholarships that have been awarded, so no fear of that. But we do ask that you do alert us to when a student has been awarded an additional scholarship. Same thing, once you add your scholarship in, you can add multiple ones if you want to notify us of many, but don't forget to click that submit button. So again, before I move on to the next steps, again, Murphy Online, I encourage families to set up access for students now. So if you do get an email letting you know that award has been updated, you have that set up already, but it's not 100% a necessity. If you do decide to attend St. Thomas, the next time you'll use Murphy Online, other than financial aid information, is going to be for orientation. So again, it doesn't hurt to get it set up ahead of time. Again, it's not a confirmation of your enrollment. It's not an obligation to enroll. It just gives you secure access to systems because we want to make sure that we are keeping all of your information secure. So next steps, I'll go over these. These will be relatively quick because I want to make sure I'm leaving time. I know there's been some questions asked in the Q&A already. So I'll go over these kind of quickly, and some things I've kind of touched on already. So next steps are going to be accept or decline federal direct loans. Just a recap of the federal direct loans, and a lot of this information is in the award letter itself. So federal direct loans are in the student's name only. There's no cosigner required. Students, by completing the FAFSA and enrolling at an accredited university like St. Thomas, are already approved to borrow these loans. As I mentioned, $5,500 is the most that a freshman student can be awarded. That amount goes up to $6,500 for sophomore year, and then junior year and senior year each is $7,500. And then the FAFSA form each year will determine that breakdown between subsidized and unsubsidized. Repayment begins 6 months after graduation, or if the student leaves school for any other reason. But for most students at St. Thomas, that's going to mean graduation. So that's when repayment will actually begin. For those unsubsidized loans, interest is accruing the entire time, including that 6-month grace period. For the subsidized loan, interest is deferred during that grace period as well as while they're in school. The interest rate is relatively low. It's 3.73%. The way that interest rates work on federal loans is that each year a student borrows is technically a separate loan. So that interest rate for sophomore year and junior year can be different than the freshman year interest rate. When students go to repay their loans at the end, after they graduate, what happens is they have one payment that they make monthly that'll split it up between each year of borrowing on a weighted basis based off of those interest rates. So, and then we and almost every other financial aid office in the country suggest borrowing these loans before other options. So you can definitely add on with other loan options I'll talk about in a second, but we don't suggest doing those in replace of the federal direct loans. These are generally the best loan options as far as interest rate goes, as far as repayment options after school. Federal direct loans also offer additional deferment if the student goes on to graduate school. They offer income-based repayment options. They will offer additional deferment if the student runs into financial hardship. So there's a lot more options when it comes to federal direct loans that a private loan or a parent loan, federal parent loan won't have as many options available for students. So as far as ways to pay that total out-of-pocket amount from your financial fit worksheet, I normally like to look at it as a past, present, future. So past would be summer work for students, savings that students have been able to save up over their life up to college. 529 plans is a education savings plan, a tax incentive education savings plan that families might have set up for the students. So these are all great options to be able to help pay for some of those costs. We'll talk a little bit in the future about if you do decide to attend St. Thomas and have a 529 plan. At our orientation session, we kind of talk about how that all gets set up to make those payments. But as far as present, what families will normally look at would be campus employment or work study. I mentioned all students can work on campus to be able to help pay for their costs. Some students will work off campus while they're enrolled in school. We also offer a payment plan. So I mentioned students are charged one semester at a time, but we do allow families to be able to make monthly payments over the 4 months of each semester. So that's available to help break those costs into smaller chunks. And then future is the other way to pay. So future would be additional loans. So we talked about the federal direct loans in detail already. The federal government also offers the Parent Plus loan, which is a loan that parents can borrow to help pay for their students' education related costs. This does involve a credit check for parents to be approved, where the federal direct loans for subsidized, unsubsidized for students do not. And this loan is ultimately in the parent's name. So even if student plans to make those payments for the parent in the future, ultimately it's going to be in the parent's name on the parent's credit history. And then private student loans are also available. Private student loans would be in the student's name first, but will need a cosigner to be approved. These are offered through private companies, some that you might have heard of, like for example, Sallie Mae, Discover. Minnesota offers a program called the Minnesota Self Loan that's available for any student attending a Minnesota college. And we actually have a whole list of lenders that students can choose from, at least as a starting point for searching for private loans at the website that you see there, stthomas.edu/other loans. That's also where the Parent Plus loan application is. I normally suggest if you're going to be using an additional loan, whether it's the parent or private loan, normally setting that up in July for a first year student is a good time period to kind of look at those things. So that gives plenty of time to kind of go through the process and get everything set up before the school year starts. So those are, again, I like to look at it as past, present, and future. It's not that you have to choose one of those options or the other. A lot of families will try to do a combination of all three to, pay some upfront with savings to, make regular payments on the payment plan, and then anything that's left over to borrow an additional loan. So I don't think you have to only do it one way. You can do a blend of those different methods, and that can be really successful for families. Another common thing that does come up that our office, the financial aid office, wants to work with your family on would be special circumstances. Specifically, what do you do if your family's financial situation has changed? So the FAFSA that you filled out uses 2020 tax information, but that's starting to be a long time ago now. So we do have the ability to update your FAFSA to better reflect the family's current financial situation. So oftentimes that might just be updating the FAFSA to your 2021 tax information. That's the simplest one. We just collect a copy of that tax return and we update it line for line. You yourself can't do that. You have to fill it out using 2020 information, but financial aid offices can do this for you. So that's one thing we can do. We can also do an estimate of 2022. Other situations we can look at outside of just reduction of income or unemployment would be medical expenses, private education expenses. If you've had changes in the household, those are types of things that we can look at. So if you have had any change, please reach out to us. Your financial aid counselor's information is going to be on that notification of award. So that's a big part of what our job is, that we work with students and families through this process. So anything that we look at, we do need supporting documentation, but we'll let you know what the documentation is. It's also listed on the special circumstance application, which is what your financial aid counselor will send you when you reach out to us about this. So we want to hear from you about these things. So we don't want you to keep it secret. It's everything that you tell us is confidential to just our office, but we want to work with you to help make St. Thomas as affordable as possible for your family, especially in light of these situations. And I should say, before I move on to the special circumstance process, lets us update the FAFSA information, which then lets us take a look at the full financial aid award again to see if the student qualifies for any additional financial aid to help bring down those costs. So that's the specific process. And then just some more opportunities that are still out there. So the financial aid award isn't carved out of stone. There are still opportunities to add on to that. So Board of Trustees scholarship is one that's still open and available for students to apply for. The admissions applicant portal is a great place to find this and other scholarship opportunities, but this is a general scholarship that's not tied to a specific major that students can apply for. It ranges from $2,000 to $4,000 per year and stacks on top of what's already been awarded. High school counselors can be a really great resource, or so guidance counselors or college and career counselors can be a great resource for finding local scholarships that students can apply for. And there's also great online searches. One I like is Dollars for Scholars. It's through an organization called Scholarship America. We actually offer matching funds up to $2,000 for Dollars for Scholars scholarships. Oftentimes those are through the local high schools, but they can also be through local organizations in the community too. But also just online searches like FastWeb or College Board, anything that a student can bring in to help reduce their costs is going to be, that much less that they have to pay out of pocket. So, so make sure students are still searching for scholarship opportunities, whether it's directly through St. Thomas or through other organizations. I mentioned campus employment. We have an online jobs board at stthomas.edu/jobs. What's going to be listed out there right now is what's open for this spring semester that's starting, but it can give students a good idea of what types of jobs are on campus. I normally suggest that students start applying for jobs for fall. Normally in late July, early August is a good time to start applying. on that website, and students will actually do oftentimes like mini interviews when they actually get to campus for that employment. So employment's not guaranteed. Even if a student has been awarded work-study funds, students do have to seek out their own employment. Most of the time, there's more job openings out there than students who are actively looking. So if a student's definitely motivated to work on campus, they should be able to find a job, but again, not ultimately guaranteed. Minimum wage in St. Paul for fall 2022 is going to be $13.50 an hour. So again, if a student works about 10 to 12 hours a week on campus, they can earn about $4,000 in the school year. And it's also a really great opportunity to build community on campus, make connections with departments on campus, and get some real world experience too. And I'm almost done here, and we'll get to your questions. Just want to go over a few other details. The confirmation deposit. So if you have the financial aid award and it seems like it's going to be something that's suitable for your family and you're ready to secure your spot at St. Thomas, there's a $400 deposit. This is fully refundable up to May 1st. Students are able to make that deposit through their admission applicant portal. Your admission counselor is going to be a great resource for kind of walking you through this step. And then housing next steps are going to come out in March. So if you have your deposit in at that point, you'll be able to get that housing information to start making those selections. And then there's a lot of visit opportunities throughout the rest of this year. So we offer campus visits every Monday through Friday. You can meet with an admission counselor, you can meet with financial aid counselors or other faculty as well. We also offer student-led campus tours, which is a really great way to get good insight on the campus and see if it's a good fit for you. And then we have admitted student events coming up, and then virtual appointments too. So you can be able to meet with people on campus just from the comfort of your own home, including we have financial Tommy Talks coming up this week. So on Thursday from noon to 5, you can meet virtually for a one-on-one meeting with a financial aid counselor like myself, and we can go over your award one-on-one. If you haven't gotten your financial aid award quite yet in the mail, we can also help you with that information too. Or if there's any other steps that we're still looking for before we can send it to you, we can let you know what those are. So it's a great way to get some quick questions answered, but we can also kind of go over in detail what next steps are and everything like that. So you can register right now at that link that's listed there. Also, if you just go on our page and go to the admissions visit page, you should find the registration link there too. So then after that, who should you contact with more questions? You can always reach out to our office. Like I mentioned on the financial aid award itself, you should see on the back page your financial aid counselor information. The email that you receive letting you know that award's on the way also comes from the assigned financial aid account, the personal financial aid counselor. So reach out to us with any questions you have. And again, if you do want to set up a personal visit, reach out to the visit office at stthomas.edu/visit, and they will get you set up. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, but I'm going to be happy to go back to anything that people want to look at. And I'll do my best to get through as many questions as I can in the next 15 minutes or so here. First question that I see are, how are St. Thomas grants awarded? That's a very good question. So St. Thomas grants are based off of the FAFSA form. So we look at what the student's financial need is, and we have kind of a complex formula that we use to determine what type of grant funding that we can award to students. So it's based off of the FAFSA form. So again, like I mentioned, you do need to file the FAFSA each year to maintain eligibility for that grant. And again, if your family's financial situation has changed, that grant can still potentially be amended based off of what that change might be. So again, if you have had a change, please reach out to us and we can always reevaluate that. In that same process, we also reevaluate any state or federal grant eligibility too. There's another question about, do families share FAFSA reports with their students? You know, that's always up to the family and what you're comfortable sharing with students. So the FAFSA itself, when you fill it out, is the student's documents. So it's in their name. I know a lot of parents will fill it out for their students, but ultimately they do have, once you fill it out on the FAFSA, they do have the right to that information. So that's one part of that question. And then when you actually get the financial aid award back, again, it's up to you what you want to share with your student. I encourage all families to make that a conversation so students are aware of what their costs to attend college are, and what that means for the family and what options families are looking at to pay for it. But ultimately, that's going to be up to you, your family decision on that. So there's a question about outside scholarships. Could it affect your FAFSA amount? So financial aid that was awarded by the FAFSA. Or let me clarify that. Financial aid that is determined by FAFSA results. There is potential for that. Typically, it has to be a large outside scholarship for that to happen. But there's potential that it might adjust work study funding, or it might adjust that subsidized, unsubsidized breakdown. That would be in like 99% of cases, that's what gets adjusted. But there's potential for other aid to potentially get adjusted. But we always look at work study and federal loans first for adjustments before we make any other adjustments. But typically it has to be a pretty large amount for most students before it starts affecting anything else like gift aid. So it's an outside possibility, but for most families, they won't run into any issue with that. So good question. Okay. So there's a question on, there's a question about if the FAFSA award takes into consideration the ACTC tuition waiver, if it's not labeled in the award. So that's a really good question. So ACTC is an agreement we have with other colleges about essentially being able to offer discounted tuition. So when you do log into that Murphy Online system, it will say specifically in there if you've been awarded any sort of tuition waiver or tuition remission, as we call it, or tuition exchange. So it'll say there. Otherwise, that's a really good one to reach out to your financial aid counselor to confirm that, to make sure, because sometimes it happens where we're not aware of that. Not saying that's likely the case in your situation, but that's possible. So that's a really good one to reach out to the financial aid counselor listed there to be able to clarify that. So good question. What is the estimated cost for JTerm? So good question. So JTerm costs for this school year are roughly about $3,000 for a 4-credit class. So JTerm is offered at a 50% tuition discount. So there's no additional financial aid that's awarded for JTerm. If a student chooses to take a JTerm class, it's never required that a student take a JTerm class, but it is offered there for flexibility's sake. But JTerm comes in at just under $3,000 for a 4-credit class between tuition and required fees for JTerm. For next year, likely that's going to be it's going to be right around $3,000 again. Costs from last school year to this coming school year went up, or we're estimating go up about 3%. So that's a typical increase. This is probably going to be a question down the line. That's a typical increase for costs. So that is one thing to know, that the cost is not set for all 4 years. It does get set each year by our board of trustees, and typically it tends to be about 3 to 4% increase in costs each year. So good questions. Regarding outside scholarships, they can affect work study and federal loan breakdown. They're not St. Thomas scholarships, if I heard correctly. What about St. Thomas grants? So there is a potential, an outside potential for outside scholarships to affect St. Thomas grants. But it happens very, very rarely, and it has to be a really large amount. So most families most students, if they are getting kind of a typical, $1,000 to $3,000 outside scholarship, or $500, whatever, in most cases, that's not going to affect it. We are just bound by federal regulations that a student can't receive more aid financial aid, then then it reasonably costs to attend that school. So not just those direct costs, but also looking at those indirect costs. So we have to make sure our students under that. So essentially they're not getting paid to attend school as opposed to, the opposite. So again, it generally does not happen. I just don't want to be recorded here saying it never, ever happens. But for 99% of students, it does not happen. So, but good question to clarify. Oh, so good question about additional loan options. Generally speaking, what's the better deal, plus or a private student loan interest rate? So the the federal Parent Plus loan interest rate is, if I remember correctly, it's 6.7% right now. That's another one that gets set each year by the Department of Education. Private student loans, and that's a fixed interest rate. Private student loans can vary anywhere from a 1% variable rate up to 13%. And it's the way that they vary is based off of the credit history of the cosigner. So it will normally come down to the credit history of the cosigner. So what I normally suggest families to do is to explore. So if you're applying for private loans and you're seeing higher interest rates come back, maybe the Parent Plus loan is a good option for you. A key thing to know with the Parent Plus loan is they do charge an origination fee, meaning they'll take funds right off the top. That origination fee is about 4.2%. So if you borrow, say, for example, $10,000, they'll keep $420 for the year and send the rest to St. Thomas, they being the Department of Education. So that's a thing to factor in when you're looking at that decision. Most private student loans won't have an origination fee. We do have one on our list that does, but most don't have that origination fee. So just something to balance when you're determining that. We're happy to work with families to look at their options. We can't tell you go with this lender or go with this loan, but we can at least help you lay out those different options. So, so good question there. A really good question that I didn't specify in my presentation, I'm glad someone asked, is EFC the same as net price? So no. So EFC, which stands for expected family contribution, is the number that's determined, the ultimate number that's determined by the FAFSA. So it's generally what the federal government feels that your family should be able to put towards college for that school year for that student. What it doesn't mean is this is what it's going to cost you at every college that your student is looking at attending. So we use that EFC number. We call it an index number because it helps determine things like federal and state grants. It helps determine our St. Thomas need-based grant, generally what we call the Founders Grant. It helps determine those things like federal loan eligibility, but it doesn't specifically say this is your cost to attend St. Thomas. So we use that number to determine to help determine what your cost to attend St. Thomas will be, but that's going to be that total out-of-pocket number that's on that financial fit worksheet. So you'll want to reference that. We do our best to get students as close to their EFC number, but unfortunately funds are limited. So we can't always get every student to their EFC number. And then on the flip side too, depending on families' financial backgrounds, their EFC number might be higher than our cost of attendance. And so we don't ask families to pay that higher number either. It's just going to be what that total out-of-pocket amount that we're listing is. So good question. So a question about federal direct loans. Another financial aid presentation that this person attended, they suggested to pay the interest that accrues on federal direct unsubsidized loan while the student's in school. Is that good advice, and how would one do that? So that is generally good advice, I would say. So again, the federal direct unsubsidized loan is a loan in the student's name that does accrue interest while the student's in school. If you are able to make payments on the interest that's accruing, that's always a good idea. That'll keep the total loan borrowing down. So I definitely would encourage that. What happens is a student is assigned what's called a federal loan servicer, which is a company that the student will make all payments through. So normally in about November of the student's freshman year, they're actually assigned that loan servicer, and then you can set up an online account with them and you can start making interest payments with them. So making any sort of early payment doesn't obligate you to continue making early payments. No repayment is actually due until the student leaves school for 6 months or more. But if you want to keep that interest down and keep that total low borrowing down, that's always good, because that's going to be that much less that the student has to pay, over the life of that loan. But it's not required. But again, if you do have extra funds to be able to make those payments, definitely a good idea to do. Also helps, borrowing federal direct loans does help build credit for students too. So even, borrowing those and paying those off early still helps build a credit history for a student. So there's a question about AP course credits and transfer credits factored into the overall cost in St. Thomas scholarships. So it's always a good idea to take AP classes and tests and then transfer credits in, same with PSEO or IB credits or what have you. There's not a direct dollar for dollar reduction in total cost at St. Thomas. It'll just depend on how many credits that a student's transferring in ultimately and what program that they're looking to do. If a student's able to graduate early, that's great. That's always going to save funds in the long run. A student St. Thomas scholarship is awarded for 8 total semesters or up until the point of graduation. So if they do graduate early, they don't get to double up for a semester, but it also doesn't penalize them. So we don't require that they do attend for 8 total semesters. So if a student can graduate early, that's great. They should definitely do that. It could also, transferring credits can also reduce the need to, say, maybe take any extra credits in a summer or JTerm class if a student needs to pick up an extra class, or just make it more flexible for them. Dollar for dollar, again, it's hard to draw a direct line. It would be something that's more specific to the student. It's hard for us to estimate this early out too without knowing what the student's going to major in and then what classes they're going to take the whole time. But most students will take about 16 credits each semester at St. Thomas. So if a student's averaging that and have that many credits coming in, there's potential of graduating early, but it also will depend on their major and what specific requirements that they're going to need. So I didn't give you really a full answer there, but generally it's always going to be good to transfer in credits, but it's hard to estimate that dollar for dollar amount. What kind of private education expenses can affect the award? So generally what we see in the financial aid office for that would be tuition from a private high school. So whether it's a private Catholic high school or non-denominational or what have you. So private tuition expenses are generally what we see for high school. We can't adjust for other students in other private colleges or public colleges or what have you. So it's only K through 12 expenses that we can adjust for. But that's a good one. If there's expenses outside of that you have, we can at least talk with you about what some of your options are. So good question on that. And then we do need that special circumstance application to be able to make any of those adjustments. So make sure to reach out to your financial aid counselor to request that, and then we can get that process going. It's not guaranteed to that private education expenses will result in additional aid. Just wanted to make that known too, but we will at least take a look. It can't hurt you from a financial aid point of view. We're not going to take more money away from you or anything like that. Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to that. I'm going to try to be less long-winded in my answers and try to get through a few more of these. Again, if you do have questions that I don't get to, feel free to reach out to your admission counselor, or sorry, your financial aid counselor with the questions. We can help you after that too, and then or sign up for a Tommy Talk coming up. Can work study hours happen in January, or does it have to be in the academic term or fall or spring? No, students can earn their work study funds in January. Students continuing on to sophomore year can also work in the summer as well for on-campus employment too. So if there's a income that went up in 2021, you don't have to report that ahead of time. There are some financial aid forecasters that you can use to see how that'll affect the 23-24 academic year. But that's another one I would say maybe reach out to your financial aid counselor just to kind of go over kind of what you're looking at now and get kind of a sense of what types of financial aid that it might affect. It might end up not affecting anything, or it could have a big effect. It's hard to know. So there are FAFSA forecaster tools that are out there, but you could also reach out to your counselor, and we can help you with that. So work study is based off of the FAFSA form. It's a state or federal fund that St. Thomas essentially partners with to be able to offer work on campus. But if a student is not awarded work study as part of their financial aid award, they can still work on campus. They still get paid at the same rate. Most jobs on campus actually do not require eligibility for work study funds. So students just have to go and seek out their employment. It's really only our off-campus partners that require work study funds. So again, if you don't see that as part of the financial aid award, a student can still work on campus. So as far as qualifying for a St. Thomas scholarship, that's just based off of the application process. So most admitted students receive a St. Thomas scholarship. If you have questions about that amount, I would actually suggest reaching out to the admission counselor, your student's assigned admission counselor, to kind of go over that process. Okay, and I think we are just about out of time. Are there scholarships other than Dollars for Scholars that St. Thomas matches? Our Dollars for Scholars is the main program that we match for. There's also the Page Foundation that we match for, but most other outside scholarships we don't match for, unfortunately, just limited funding overall. But it's another one you can reach out to a financial aid counselor and we can check in on that too. But most of the time it's just going to be that Dollars for Scholars program. So yeah, students can buy and sell used books through the St. Thomas bookstore. We also have rental books available. Rental books aren't guaranteed, and students don't have to buy their books through the bookstore. So if you do find the same book online, you can go ahead and buy it. Free country as far as that goes. But our bookstore does a really good job of trying to be competitive with the marketplace. So it's a good place to check first, and you know that you're very likely to find the book there and in good quality. So I think I am out of time for questions. I sincerely apologize if I did not get to your question. Again, feel free to sign up for a Tommy Talk. And it takes about 15 minutes. It's through a Zoom just like this, and we can help help get your questions answered, or feel free to email your counselor and they'll help you get that answered quickly. So thank you all for coming. Again, this has been recorded, so we will get this posted on the website somewhat shortly. And then again, any questions that you have throughout the process, please don't hesitate to reach out, because that's what we're here for and that's what we like to do. So thank you all.